to reduce herbicide use throughout the city. And we've been going one section at a time. But it's been obvious as we're weeding that in many cases, the landscape is designed to be easily maintained with chemical sprays. But there would be other possible designs that would be easier to maintain by hand,
right,
without sprays. And part of what we need to do is rethink the aesthetic of what we want the city to look like. So I think that's an ongoing conversation with the community and the city. I think the goals are clear. We would like to develop a vision of an easily maintained, healthful, ecologically sustainable and beautiful cityscape.
Yeah, we might even rethink what's considered a weed.
In some cases, yes. There are plants that want to grow, and if they can grow in a way that is not problematic, maybe they really have a place, even though they're now considered weeds.
Yeah. Is there any last thoughts you want to share? How can people get involved or reach the organizers?
Well, I'm putting my email and phone number out there, and people are welcome to contact me.
Do you want to put it out on this show?
Okay, yes. That's
Liz Zwick?
Liz Zwick at yahoo.com. That's LIZZWICK at yahoo.com.
Wow.
And my phone number is 541-499-2264. And at this point, I am organizing the weed team. And somebody wants to jump forward and help me with the organizing, that would be great too.
Right.
But I'm looking for people who want to be involved in a major work party, like, for instance, laying down mulch over an area. I'm looking for people who want to be part of an ongoing team to make a commitment
Right.
to a particular area. I'm looking for people with ideas about how to solve one of our problem areas, or with ideas for some part of the city that they know about, where they could propose something that they can see workable. And I also want people talking and thinking and contacting me and others about how our city and our world should be taken care of.
Yeah, well, I hope it's the way that you've been taking care of Talent Park. I was there for part of one day, and you were there for 4 days, for most of the day. Congratulations,
Yes.
It's a great success and a wonderful good news here on Rogue Freedom Watch.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. There's other good news in talent. Last year, a number of concerned citizens, including Dolly Warden, Kara Cruikshank, Laura Ferguson, Meadow Sweet, and Jamie Hickner, approached the Talent Elementary School about alternatives to the spraying of toxic herbicides on school ground where children play. Quickly, the principal and school superintendent agreed that something could be done, and were even hoping for such a proposal. The group, including members of Rogue Valley Pollinators Project and others, began a citizens' effort to remove weeds by hand during community work parties, and went on to install an edible food garden working with students, parents, and faculty. The non-chemical maintenance of the grounds and garden is continuing, subject to review by the school administration. That's great news in talent. Thank you, Elizabeth Zwick. Next, we have a report on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is an enormous transnational corporate and banker trade agreement that has been drafted in secret and would affect 12 Pacific Rim countries of 800 million people and 40% of the world economy. The US, Canada, Mexico, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, Peru, Chile, and Brunei are all included in the massive trade agreement, though their governments have not been fully consulted, and we mostly only know about the TPP from WikiLeaks. It is a document of 29 chapters, only 5 of which address trade issues: banking regulations, internet freedom, access and pricing of medicines, food laws and regulations, labor standards and wages, environmental protections, GMO labeling laws and bans, Buy American and Buy Local incentives, climate change initiatives, and other aspects of world economy and national sovereignty would all be harmed by the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It allows for the creation of an international corporate court, which would rule that many of these governmental and citizen protections restrict corporate profits, and that corporations could collect monetary compensation from national governments for the losses. Such trade agreements are constitutionally the jurisdiction of the U.S. Congress to negotiate and approve. Currently, some members of Congress are planning to propose a fast-track legislation which would bypass Congress and allow approval of the TPP by the President's office alone, with no amendments or changes, and with only a very short time to consider the sweeping impacts. President Obama promoted the TPP during trips to Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and other countries this summer. Oregon's Democratic Senator Ron Wyden on the Senate Finance Committee was possibly planning on joining Republican Senator Orrin Hatch to propose fast track as soon as next week. Corporate lobbyists have been influencing the senators for these 6 years the TPP has been developing. Now, during the President's Day recess that ends Monday, is the best time for concerned citizens to bring their own influence, telling our Senator Wyden that we do not accept fast track and that we reject the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There was an event today at the Senator Wyden's offices in Medford, and I was there, and others with signs and statements being made all around the country, but in particular, we organized our own demonstration here to let Senator Wyden know we're not interested in the fast track or Trans-Pacific Partnership. I wrote a letter to Senator Wyden. Dear Senator Wyden, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is another looming nightmare for not just the people of this continent, but much of the world. Mr. Wyden, I have heard of your proposed fast track. I insist that you, in your role on the Senate Finance Committee, see to it that fast track is refused and the Congress deliberates on the Trans-Pacific Partnership in full view of the voting public. You claim to be a champion of transparency, but the Trans-Pacific Partnership is the worst example of secrecy and deceit imaginable, and fast track would further obscure the crucial details of this brutal trade deal. But we know all about it, Mr. Wyden, and if you betray the voters who you put into office, we will not let them forget when voting time comes around again. In 2 years' time, should the Trans-Pacific Partnership be enacted as proposed, we will be sure to lay the environmental destruction, economic impoverishment, shredding of local economies and ecologies, evisceration of local and state laws, and further enslavement of this country, both its people and its finances, at the door of your office and the Finance Committee. You appear to be a champion of American and Oregon jobs, too, helping Solar World establish in Oregon. More of this, please, Mr. Wyden, jobs and work in the renewable energy transition we so desperately need, not just as a nation and state, but as a world. Renewables now, fossil fuels as history. The Trans-Pacific Partnership will make efforts to phase out the fossil fuel economy harder, protecting and further supporting this world-destroying industry. For that reason, we, and I mean all life on Earth, insist you refuse fast track and bring this earth-shattering, future-rending trade deal before Congress, where we, the people, and all the rest of life we represent can see it. There, we will help our political representatives know what we want, and we don't want Trans-Pacific Partnership. Only the 1% ultra-wealthy power mongers of this world they are destroying want Trans-Pacific Partnership, and that is the Koch brothers, the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Morgans, and a handful of others we can name. Have any of them or their organizations funded your campaigns? Remember, your allegiance is to the voters, and ultimately, as a living being, to the living earth as a whole. I live in an Oregon county that now has a ban on the growing of GMO crops. I worked for 2 years and more to pass this citizens' initiative, and I do not wish to see the Trans-Pacific Partnership sweep that all away to further enrich and put more control into the greedy hands of Monsanto's and Syngenta's owners. Solar World would likely be affected by TPP too. You would not want the feeling of that accomplishment burned away by this toxic trade deal. It is unacceptable to me that you might fast-track this horrid deal. I would accept a referral of the TPP to the constitutionally supported process that exists in Congress, where we the people can best have our say. And we say, no Trans-Pacific Partnership. Viewers can call Wyden's DC office at, here's a phone number for you, 202-224-5244, and we called Wyden from our demonstration today in Medford. Or you can write him using his website form at www.wyden.senate.gov/contact. Express your rejection of Fast Track and the Trans-Pacific Partnership and in favor of all that is wholesome and good about our country and our Pacific Rim neighbors. Because of messages like this from all across the nation this week, and especially in Oregon from groups like Oregon Fair Trade and Citizen Trade Campaign, a top Senate Democrat, so much for transparency, called the scheduling of a trade hearing for next week premature because there's no agreement on how to proceed. A spokesman for Senator Ron Wyden said this morning that there is still work to be done on incorporating provisions on transparency and other concerns in any fast-track bipartisan legislation. Quote, "There is no agreement on fast-track or other aspects of the trade agenda more broadly," spokesman said. Senator Wyden is continuing to fight for more transparency, more oversight, and provisions to ensure American workers come first in our trade policy. Sounds like Wyden has delayed the hearing because of too much public pressure to his leanings towards proposing fast track for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Well done, people of Oregon and the nation, for now. In our final segment, I'm really excited to welcome two guests on the topic of state-mandated vaccinations in Oregon. This is the bill in the Oregon legislature, SB 442-3. As usual, on critical issues that affect our civil liberties, we're seeing a total media blackout, except here on Rogue Freedom Watch. Just to give some background, this is an amendment to Oregon's vaccine exemption law to disallow any philosophical or religious exemptions. It directs Oregon Health Authority to require submission of documents to school administrators for purposes of declining immunization, including the signature of a healthcare practitioner verifying that parents have reviewed risks and benefits of immunization, or a certificate verifying that the parent has completed a vaccine educational module. In other words, this bill intends not only to totally remove the philosophical and religious exemptions, but will put into state law mandates that all children, regardless of their family histories or risk factors, get the full set of recommended vaccines. The only exemptions will have to come from medical exemptions, and to make matters worse, they plan to select which medical providers will be certified to give those exemptions. This is a direct infringement on our civil liberties, as well as a direct disregard for the Nuremberg laws, which after World War II and the atrocities of Nazi Germany were changed to forbid forced medical procedures. The Helsinki Accord is very clear. All patients have the right to informed consent prior to medical procedures. This is international law as well as a constitutional right. And now, our two guests we have with us now, who went to the Senate hearing at Salem on February 18th, are award-winning author Dr. Jennifer Margulis and local farmer and activist Mary Alionis. Welcome to Rogue Freedom Watch.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So Jennifer, let's start. Give us some background for this bill and what you think are the inherent risks involved.
Well, one of the biggest problems with this bill is that it's being fast-tracked through the Senate. You were just talking about other things that we fast-track. But basically, the idea behind it is to remove all philosophical and religious exemptions, as you just pointed out, which means that the way the bill has been written, anyone who chooses for any reason not to vaccinate, even if it's just against one vaccine, their child will no longer have access to either public or private school, and I believe that that would also extend to daycare, because the way the bill has been written, it doesn't specify public school. So it's not only keeping Oregon's children out of public school, it's giving them absolutely no access to any school at all. It's very complicated. It's very problematic. The actual bill says nothing. It's a skeleton, and then we have the -3 amendments. But the senator who introduced the bill has said all along very clearly that her agenda is to stop vaccine exemptions for religious and philosophical reasons in Oregon. This is to coerce parents to get every vaccine on the schedule as they are offered, the way the CDC guidelines are stated, and the way that the state of Oregon, suggests, well, not mandates the CDC recommendations. That's 100% what she's trying to do.
And her name is Stein?
Yeah, so it's Senator Stein Hayward.
Stein Hayward.
Yeah, she's a Democrat. The majority of the people behind this bill are Democrats. The Republican senators have been the ones who have been brave enough to speak out against the bill, interestingly enough.
We'll get to Senator Bates' position later.
Yes.
Mary, why did you decide to drive 5 hours to be at the hearing?
Well, I've been very upset about the entire media blackout and the witch hunt that's been going on with this whole event with the measles outbreak at Christmas. I've found it very upsetting the way people were being, ridiculed and laughed at and slandered. And the people I felt the most upset for were the parents of vaccinating your children. I couldn't even picture being in this environment, not being able to speak up, not being able to make their points known, not being able to tell their story for fear of being laughed at and called all sorts of bad names and being threatened by Time magazine to be put on their list of people who don't vaccinate. So I had this thought a few days even before this all came up that wouldn't it be nice if we were honest about this being a war on disease, and as such acknowledge that these children are our soldiers in this war and that they deserved a war memorial, and that these little fallen soldiers should get honored instead of shown, just thrown under the rug and their parents shamed and disregarded. So we should make a war memorial for them. And I wanted to make that statement. I figured a lot of people would make a lot of statements there that would cover all the facts and all the figures, and there would be parents, talking about their children. But what I wanted to do was bring up that.
Mm-hmm.
Craig, if I could speak to what Mary just said about the media blackout, here's the problem. The only thing that we're hearing in the mainstream press is that we're hearing that the science and the doctors are on the side of the current CDC vaccine schedule, and the crazy, hysterical parents and the parents who are fantasizing that something happened to their kids are on the other side. And what I've been trying to tell people, because I do have a lot of contact with the mainstream media, I'm a professional journalist and a book author, and I've been trying to tell people who ask to interview me, we have so many doctors, we have so many scientists, we have so many PhDs and MDs who are saying, listen, this isn't a question about vaccines with a capital V in general. This is a question about safety, vaccine safety, and the problem with the current CDC vaccine schedule. So you don't have to be anti-vaccine in order to be very concerned about people getting injuries from vaccines, in order to be very concerned about our current CDC schedule. That's what my problem is. When I testified on Wednesday, I was very clear that I have chosen to vaccinate my children, and that I have a very healthy respect for vaccines. I think they have an important place in modern medicine. But our current CDC vaccine system is not helping our children. And a case in point is that there's only 2 states now in the union that have no exemptions besides medical. It's West Virginia and Mississippi. So Mississippi has the highest rate of infant mortality in the country. They have one of the highest rates of obesity in the country. They actually have the sickest children in America. They are literally number 50 out of 50 states. And to hear Senator Bates say, we want to be like Mississippi, was very disillusioning. We do not want to be like Mississippi. Oregon is in the top 20 in terms of child health, and we also do have a very high rate of vaccine exemptions, but not outrageously high, not in any way that's jeopardizing anybody. And the honest truth is that many people from the CDC, most of the doctors in Southern Oregon, are choosing to individualize the vaccine schedule for their own children, and they're not following the current guidelines because the current guidelines are harming us.
They're good for corporate profits. The pharmaceutical companies, in my opinion, are operating a sales campaign. They want everyone to be their customer. Let's go back to Mary, but you too, Jennifer, do you guys think your testimony will be considered and have an influence in Salem?
I definitely felt like I was talking to zealots You know, it felt very much as if I was talking to someone that was a religious zealot or someone they're not going to necessarily sway because they have God on their side with this. You know, their goal is to eradicate disease, and they feel that the means that we are following are justified. And I was simply wanting them to be honest about their means and to acknowledge that you know, people were falling by the wayside. I will say that I ran over on my time because at the beginning, when all of the pro people were up, they let them speak as long as they wanted. They spoke for 10, 15 minutes. But as soon as there was far more in opposition, as soon as they got through all of the pro people, they suddenly decided that we only had 3 minutes each. Kind of interesting. At any rate, I ran over my time. And as soon as I talked about the little fallen soldiers and the war memorial, they got very vociferous about me being done. So that was rather interesting to me. I mean, I felt like, you know, I made a statement, and that's what I wanted to do. That's why I wanted to be there.
You got a response.
I did. I definitely got a response.
This is a fierce issue. I saw some of the debate on social media. Ashland was in the national news. Well, we have plenty of time to keep you guys sharing your thoughts. How do you feel your testimony went, and will it be an influence?
Well, I think that most of the senators need a little bit of basic education about what this bill is really about. This bill